Hey, we're back in studio, and right now with me I've got Scott Hurd. He's the co-founder and CEO of Westleaf Cannabis, trading on the TSX Venture under the symbol WL. Scott, welcome to our little show.
Thanks for having me.
Scott, give us an overview. What is Westleaf Cannabis all about?
So Westleaf is one of the only, or one of the very few, truly vertically integrated cannabis companies.
That's a bold statement.
And what I mean by that is we own or control assets across the entire cannabis value chain. So starting with production and cultivation, we have a large scale, about 115,000 square foot production facility under construction in Battleford, Saskatchewan. We have one of Canada's largest processing, extraction, R&D, manufacturing, and fulfillment centers located in Calgary. And really the cornerstone of our vertically integrated strategy is what we're doing on the retail distribution. And the reason we think retail is so important is really two reasons. Number one, the federal packaging and advertising restrictions in Canada are so restrictive that, in our opinion, licensed producers today are effectively selling an undifferentiated product. 70% of the packaging is Health Canada warning labels. You get a rather small allocation for a benign brand element. They restrict the color, the size. And then you compound that with the fact that licensed producers can't use traditional advertising mediums to reach consumers. And what you have is a market that's incredibly difficult to build brands aligned with consumers.
Right.
So our thesis has been it's through the retail distribution that you get the best opportunity to control the consumer experience and ultimately help shape and influence their purchasing habits to buy our products, to create brand equity, and ultimately create demand pull through our vertically integrated supply chain.
Interesting. So what is your retail presence?
So we're doing about 30 retail locations across Canada.
30?
Correct.
Really? In which provinces?
Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC.
Wow.
We should have north of 20 operational in 2019. And what's really unique about our retail strategy is our approach to retail. So we did a competitive analysis of the Canadian cannabis retail landscape, and we saw two things. The first is that it was highly undifferentiated, and the second was that we could really group our competitors into two distinct buckets. So on one end of the spectrum, we saw everyone trying to be the Apple Store of cannabis.
Right.
And on the end, when you look at a lot of our competitors and you ignore their color palette and their logo, the in-store experience is functionally the exact same. On the other end of the spectrum, there's these groups that are reinforcing the stigma that we're trying to get away from as an industry in general, and that's that Cheech and Chong head shop-like feel. So we recognized a tremendous white space opportunity to do something unique and do something different. And so we worked with a creative design firm to come up with our cannabis retail concept, which is called Prairie Records.
Okay.
And what Prairie Records is a reinvention of the cannabis purchasing experience that leverages the instinctual tie of recreational cannabis and music in a sophisticated yet approachable environment that appeals to a wide variety of consumers.
That's interesting, because you said Prairie Records, my first thought was sounds like a record store. And that immediately got me thinking of, well, almost 9 times out of 10 when I went to a record store as a young person, I was high, which is hilarious.
Well, everybody has a relationship with music.
Sure.
And it's through that relationship and Prairie Records that we think we can align with, in a way, with consumers that our competitors can't. And so the Canadian cannabis retail experience is unlike any other retail experience in the world. And what I mean by that is it's so highly restrictive that when you come into the store, there's no product on the floor, everything's behind lock and key, there isn't really great opportunities to merchandise. So the problem facing all retailers today is how do you create a unique and engaging retail experience that's tangible and educational for the consumer? And that's what we deliver with Prairie Records. So when you come into our stores, you'll find all of the traditional mediums you'd find in the Apple Store of cannabis. You'll find the digital menu billboards. You'll find the sales associates with iPads. But we take it one step further, and when we call it Prairie Records, we actually utilize records as a medium to create a tactile and engaging and educational experience for the consumer.
Like vinyl records.
So I actually brought a couple of them today. So we're partnered with Tilray.
Okay.
And this is actually the Tilray High Park brand. And what we've done in stores, we've taken all of those elements that Tilray and High Park would have wanted to put on the packaging, but they can't because of the packaging restrictions, and we put it on a record in store. And what this does is it gives dimension to the brand. It provides an opportunity to co-curate content with them, to talk about the effect of the product or the flavor profile of the product.
And is there music in there?
There actually is an album in here.
Great. What band?
Well, it's not a real album. It's just an album that's branded.
Oh, okay.
But you can't. Well, you could listen to it. It's actually an old vinyl record of sorts.
Wow, that's cool. Well, that's such a clever idea. I can understand why Tilray would partner with you, because they're kind of sort of visionary in that regard. That's amazing. So I'm going to be in BC next week. Is there a store in Vancouver?
We don't have any stores open in BC yet. We actually have a store opening next week in Warman, Saskatchewan, which is about 10 minutes from the Saskatoon airport.
Might be worth a little side trip.
Well, we'll invite you out for the grand opening on February 7th.
Sure. Well, that's really interesting. This is the most unique and original approach I've heard to the idea of retailing cannabis in Canada. So A, I'm super impressed. B, I can't wait to visit a store. C, I'm curious as to, like, how are you going to overcome the restrictions on advertising and marketing? I mean, it's a great thing to open a retail physical presence, and location, yes, but what are the restrictions on signage, on advertising in publications, on putting a sign in the window saying something's on special? Is all of that off the table at this point?
Yeah, it is quite restrictive, and most of the advertising is targeted. You have to utilize mediums that are targeted to 18 or 19 plus. So really your best opportunity to advertise is actually inside a brick and mortar retail store. And it's through the whole record concept where we can really dimensionalize brands and bring these brands to life in store and help consumers align with products of our own and that of our strategic partners, which includes Tilray and Vivo.
Wow, that's interesting. So does this approach to retailing cost you anything more than any other approach to retailing?
Not really. I would say our strategy skews to a more premium end, just in how we're designing and building our stores. So our strategy has really been to locate our stores in very high traffic areas, densely populated areas, resort areas, and so we're skewing to the higher end with it.
Do you have any plans to migrate to the United States when laws make it that possible?
I mean, we're really focused on executing in 2019. As I mentioned, we're building upwards of 30 retail stores. We're operationalizing a lab and processing facility and a large-scale cultivation facility. So the focus is on execution, but also looking at international opportunities where we can expand our brand over time when we're ready.
Very cool. Scott, that's one of the best stories I've heard this year so far, for sure, if not the best retailing story I've heard yet. So we're going to follow this story closely. Thank you very much for coming in and giving us a heads up on this. And I'm going to come out and visit you at one of your stores as soon as I possibly can.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for having me.